I never thought of myself as someone who had nightmares. For years, I slept peacefully, free from bad dreams. But an event 2 years ago changed that. The nightmares didn't start right away. They came gradually, getting worse as time passed. What unsettled me most was how my mind twisted a real memory into something exaggerated and wrong. Over time, the dreams became less frequent but never fully stopped. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, hearing words I never actually said. It felt like my mind couldn't let go of the past, even though the real event was far less intense than what my dreams portrayed. One night, I woke up again at 2:30 a.m., drenched in sweat. My wife slept peacefully beside me, thankfully undisturbed. This time, I hadn't cried out in my sleep. I couldn't figure out what triggered the dreams, but they always followed the same pattern, a distorted memory from 2 years ago. In the dream, I was sitting at my office desk with a half-empty scotch bottle, an untouched glass, and a loaded revolver in front of me. I'd down the liquor without feeling its burn, then check the revolver to make sure all 6 chambers were loaded. I'd mutter something like, "I'll destroy them all, but I'll end up in jail." The words varied, but the feeling of anger and self-destruction never changed. Thankfully, the nightmares happened less often, at first weekly, sometimes twice a week, but now less than once every 2 months. The dreams felt real, yet had little to do with the actual event. There was scotch, but I was on the couch, not at my desk, and I don't even own a weapon. I never threatened to destroy anything that night. I just got very drunk and passed out on the couch. To understand it all, I need to go back 2 years. 2002 was a rough year. It started with my wife, Kathy, and I battling city inspectors over our house plans. They rejected our permit until our engineer signed off, confirming everything was up to code. Once we got the permit, we fought with the contractor over deadlines until we finally moved in by August. On top of that, Kathy and I were both swamped with work. I'm Fred Alpinas, and on March 6, 2002, Kathy and I celebrated 6 years of marriage. Despite the house issues, life was going well. I had been with the Independent Investigations Corporation, IOIC, in Indianapolis for 8 years. We're not your typical private investigators. We work for large insurance companies, investigating fraud, recovering stolen property, and minimizing losses. We get paid a percentage of what we recover or save. As a lead investigator, I can pick my cases and delegate to others. It's a profitable business. I was 30 at the time, just starting to find gray hairs in my thick brown hair. I'm confident, whatever that means, and while I'm not movie star handsome, I'm not unattractive. I have a slightly crooked nose from a college boxing match and dark brown eyes. I'm 6'2", 185 pounds, and in good shape, with an athletic build. Kathy, at 29, was the most beautiful woman I knew. She stood 5'8", with dark brown hair streaked with red that fell in long curls. Her blue eyes had flecks of green. She'd been heading the accounting department at DC&H for 2 years, managing 20 accountants. Her company was doing well, and she'd received nice bonuses recently. In early 2002, DC&H had some issues at their Indianapolis office. The manager was fired in February, and Greg Bartlett took over. Greg was around 5'5", a bit overweight and nearly bald with a ring of hair around his head. Kathy thought he was a good manager, and I liked him when we met. At the same time, the company relocated one of its vice presidents, Jack Hansen, to Indianapolis. Kathy mentioned the company was spreading out its VPs to help close big deals in various cities. Jack Hansen, who moved from New York, was about 45, 5'10", and in great shape. He was friendly, but I noticed he had a wandering eye. He was married, but it didn't seem to slow him down. I'd met men like him before, and I didn't like them. Kathy, however, thought he was fantastic, and so did everyone at DC&H. She often talked about his great ideas for business, which meant more money for her. By summer, things had settled down at DC&H, and our house was nearly finished. We moved in during the second week of August and loved it. On move-in day, I joked with Kathy about making love in every room. She looked at all the unpacked boxes, took my hand, and said, "Let's get the kitchen out of the way right now." We did, but with all the work, we never got to the other rooms. Still, we stayed connected, mostly in our bedroom at night. One evening, I brought up starting a family, as we had discussed before. I suggested Kathy stop taking birth control so we could have a summer baby. She hesitated, saying Jack Hansen suggested waiting until next year since she was in line for a promotion. I was surprised she was discussing our personal plans with him, and annoyed she was now calling him Jack. She explained it was just office talk, but I wasn't thrilled with the delay. Still, I agreed to wait until January. By year's end, both of us were busy with work and spent less time together. We tried to make weekends special, but work often intruded. DC&H was in the middle of a major merger, and Kathy's department was swamped. I also had several investigations to wrap up before the year ended. On the last weekend of November, Kathy and I finally got some time off together and went Christmas shopping. Over dinner, she told me the merger with National Pharmaceutical would be finalized by December 20th, and she'd be getting her promotion. I was excited and suggested we start working on having a baby. Kathy, however, wanted to wait a few more months to settle into her new role before taking maternity leave. She made me promise not to tell anyone about the merger, as it could ruin the deal. I reassured her I wouldn't, and even joked about buying stock in National Pharmaceutical. She quickly warned me that would be insider trading and could land us in jail. I assured her I was just joking, and she relaxed. She was nervous, knowing how close the deal was, and didn't want anything to go wrong. December was filled with holiday parties, including ours at IIC on Friday, December 6th. It was a modest event with 43 people, employees, spouses, and partners. We had drinks, appetizers, dinner, and then some music and dancing. The party was low-key, probably because most of us are investigators who work in the field and don't know each other well. I have one close friend at IIC, Bill Ripley, and we sat with him and his wife, Susan. It was a good time, though not wild. We stayed until midnight and then headed home. Once there, I reminded Kathy of our joke about making love in every room of the house when we first moved in. Kathy smiled and teased, "Maybe we can check another room off the list tonight." We talked about starting a family while lying in bed. Kathy suggested we have 2 kids, 2 years apart, and planned to stop birth control in February, hoping to conceive by November. I agreed, feeling relieved that we finally had a plan. However, things started going downhill. On Saturday, after returning from work, I found Kathy staring out the window, distant. She barely reacted when I spoke to her. Sensing something was wrong, I waited until after dinner to ask gently, "What's bothering you, Katie?" She finally admitted, "There's a problem with the deal with National Pharmaceutical. The president, Mr. Benson, is making unrealistic demands. If we don't meet them, we could lose the deal, and I could lose my job." I tried to reassure her, saying, "It won't ruin everything. We have each other." "You don't understand," she replied, her voice tense. "If the deal falls through, it's because of me. I can't explain more, but I haven't done anything wrong." I was confused, but didn't press further. The conversation ended there. The next day, Kathy was even more distant, barely speaking to me. On Monday, she left for work early, saying she had important meetings. That morning, I cleaned the house and took out the trash. Something fell from the bathroom trash can, but after a brief search, I couldn't find it. That evening, Kathy's mood hadn't improved. I asked, "Has work gotten any better?" She replied sharply, "I can't talk about it. I'm under pressure, but I'll handle it." By Wednesday, Kathy seemed to be coming out of her funk. When I got home, she greeted me with a kiss and told me she loved me for the first time in days. Although she was more affectionate, I could tell she wasn't fully back to her usual self, still preoccupied and without her usual smile. "Can you talk about it now, or is it still off limits?" I asked, jokingly. "I probably shouldn't, but it looks like we found a way to satisfy Mr. Benson," she said with some relief. "Jack thinks things will work out." She sounded more hopeful, but still tense. When I asked if she was relieved or determined, she just sighed. "Hopefully, it'll be over soon." It always bothered me when she referred to Hanson as Jack. She said it was because the office was informal, but she still called her boss Mr. Bartlett. That night, Kathy wanted me to hold her, but we didn't make love. I could feel the tension in both of us. After tossing and turning for 20 minutes, I got up and went to the kitchen for a drink. Kathy's briefcase was on a chair, and I felt compelled to take a look inside. I found her day planner and saw meetings with Mr. Bartlett, Hanson, and Mr. Benson. It seemed odd for Kathy to be meeting with a client since she worked in accounting, not sales. Maybe her promotion was leading to something bigger. There was one strange thing in her calendar. Starting on December 6th, she had written started and numbered the days from 1 to 14, with December 20th circled and underlined. I couldn't figure out why she was counting those days. Over the next few days, Kathy's mood improved, but she remained a bit distant. I pieced together that December 20th was important, likely related to the deal with Mr. Benson. That Friday, December 13th, I closed one of my cases and met Bill Ripley for a beer to celebrate. I told him about the numbers in Kathy's planner, though I didn't say it was hers. Bill was just as puzzled as I was. "Maybe you should ask Mary Farrell for a woman's perspective," he suggested. Mary was a top investigator at IIC, so it seemed like good advice. We had a few more beers talking about life and work. I told Bill about my dream of opening my own detective agency one day. He laughed and said, "Let me know if you do. I'll work for you, but you'll have to pay me more than IIC does." "Sure," I joked. "You're already overpaid." We finished our beers, chatted a bit more, and I headed home, feeling disappointed again. Kathy was loving and attentive, but we still hadn't had sex all weekend. What bothered me most was the emotional distance between us. By Monday, I told Kathy I'd likely have to work late every night that week to finish my 2 cases. "You can't work late on Friday," she said. "We need to be at the party by 8:30, so be home by 7 o'clock to get ready." "Okay, I'll be home by 7, I promised. My frustration grew as the week went on. I closed 1 case on Tuesday and we went out to dinner to celebrate, but Kathy wasn't feeling well afterward, so nothing happened between us. By Wednesday, she brushed me off again. I tried to be patient, knowing she was stressed at work, but I was losing patience. I hoped everything would be resolved after Friday, once Kathy learned whether she was getting her promotion. By Thursday, I was close to finishing my last case. I had one chance to solve it quickly on Friday morning, but if things didn't go smoothly, I might not make it home by 7 o'clock. At dinner that night, I warned Kathy it could be tough to get home in time. "You promised," she said, frustrated. "You need to be home for the party." "I'll try my best," I replied. "If I can't make it, go ahead without me and I'll meet you there." She didn't argue further, but the tension lingered. Friday morning, I caught a break in my case involving stolen jewelry worth over $1 million. The thief had offered to sell it back for $250,000, and the insurance company agreed, saving $750,000. I had to handle the exchange. It took time to arrange the meeting and collect the money from the insurance company. By early afternoon, I had the cash and was ready to meet the thief. I followed the thief to an old parking garage on the west side of town. From across the street, I watched him open the trunk of an old car but take nothing out. He closed the trunk, looked around to ensure no one was following, and left without noticing me. Once he was gone, I crossed the street, picked the padlock, and got inside. I opened the car's trunk and found a small canvas bag containing all the stolen jewelry. I left a note on the broken lock that read, "Better luck next time," and headed back to the office. I called the insurance company to report the recovery and arrange for the jewelry to be picked up. It was a good day. I stopped the thief from profiting, saved the insurance company money, and secured a solid fee for my firm. As I was leaving the office, I saw Mary Farrell talking to another investigator. After she finished, I invited her to lunch. "Are you buying?" she asked with a smile. "I'll pay if you help me with something," I said. "Deal," she replied. We grabbed sandwiches and sodas at a nearby shop. While we ate, I explained what I'd found in a day planner. The word "started," written on December 6th, followed by numbers up to 14, with the 20th circled and underlined. Mary thought for a moment, then smiled. "It's a cycle," she said. "The person started their period on the 6th and counted 14 days. The 20th is circled because it's the most fertile day." I was stunned. It had never occurred to me. "Does that help your case?" she asked, still smiling. "I'm not sure," I said, my mind racing. "But it might." I thanked Mary for her insight, still processing what she had told me. Back at the office, I spent the rest of the day on paperwork, distracted by thoughts of why Kathy would be tracking her cycle. It didn't make sense, especially since she wasn't planning to stop birth control until February. A nagging thought crossed my mind. Was she tracking it for someone else? That unsettling idea stuck with me. I felt like I was missing pieces of the puzzle, and my gut told me something was wrong, but I knew I needed to be patient and not jump to conclusions. By 5 o'clock, I finished my work and headed home. I felt a mix of anticipation, having solved a big case and gotten some answers about Kathy's day planner. I hoped the evening's party would help ease her stress. When I got home around 5:30, I saw a light on inside. As I unlocked the door, I glimpsed movement at the top of the stairs. Kathy was coming down, completely unclothed, holding a towel and shaving cream. I froze, confused. She walked into the living room, and suddenly everything felt different. Without thinking, I hurried back to my car, needing a moment to collect myself. After pulling into the garage, I gave Kathy time to realize I was home and get dressed. When I entered the house, I thought I heard a door close upstairs. "Katie, I'm home," I called out. She responded from the bathroom. "You're home early. That's great. I'm getting ready. Why don't you use the guest shower?" "Why?" I asked, puzzled by the unusual suggestion. "I'm busy here," she replied quickly. Something felt off, but I couldn't decide if it was a game or something else entirely. At 7:30, Kathy was ready, looking composed and smiling slightly. "You look great," I said. "You're going to turn some heads tonight." "Yours, I hope," she replied, her tone unreadable. We drove to the party in silence for a while. Finally, Kathy broke the tension with a quiet apology. "I'm sorry, Fred. It seemed like a good idea at the time." After a pause, I replied, "No problem. We'll talk about it this weekend. Let's just enjoy tonight." The party was at the DC&H office in a large auditorium on the second floor. As soon as we arrived and checked our coats, Hanson appeared, pulling Kathy aside. I watched them closely, feeling my tension rise. They spoke quietly. Kathy nodded a few times, then shook her head. Hanson looked frustrated, but eventually smiled. He seemed to offer her something, and although she didn't seem thrilled, she agreed before he walked away. When Kathy returned, I asked, "What did Hanson want?" "The deal with National Pharmaceutical closes at 10 o'clock tonight. I have to meet with Jack and Mr. Bartlett. If it goes well, we'll get the contract." "And your promotion?" I asked. "Yes, if all goes well," she said without enthusiasm. "Then we can start trying for a baby?" I asked, hoping for excitement. "Yes, we can start our family," she said, but her tone was flat. I wanted to push her for the truth, but deep down, I felt I already knew what was going on. As we entered the party, Kathy looped her arm through mine, acting affectionate. The room was beautifully decorated with tables, a band playing at one end, and a buffet and open bar at the other. I scanned the crowd, not knowing many people, but quickly spotting a man standing alone at the bar. He stood out, a tall man in a dark blue Armani suit. "Who's that by the bar?" I asked Kathy. "I don't know," she replied, though her body language said otherwise. "Let's get a drink," I suggested. "You go ahead. I need to say hello to some people from my department," she said. I went to the bar, got Kathy a glass of red wine, and grabbed a beer for myself. I then approached the man in the Armani suit. "Mr. Benson, how are you?" I asked casually. He looked surprised. "How do you know me?" "It's my job to know things," I replied. "I'll bring this wine to Miss Alpin, but I'd like to come back and talk if you don't mind." Benson, looking uneasy, studied me for a moment before saying, "Sure, I'll be here." I handed Kathy her drink while she chatted with colleagues. "I'll walk around while you talk," I said. "Don't go far," she replied with a tense smile. "I need you by my side tonight." "I won't be long," I assured her, sensing her unease. I returned to Benson at the bar. "I'm Fred, security at DC&H, just making sure everything runs smoothly tonight." Benson grew more uneasy. "That's what Jack told me," he muttered. "Just waiting for the fun to begin." "You seem to know everything," he said nervously. "It's my job," I replied with a smirk. "You like brunettes?" "I love brunettes, especially with long hair," he grinned. "Like Miss Alpin?" I asked directly. "Exactly," he said with a bolder smile. I wanted to punch him but held back. "I bet you like them bald too?" I added, pushing further. "Bald is good," he laughed. I'd heard enough. "I need to go check on things. If you need me, I'll be around," I said, walking away, muttering curses under my breath. Back at the hall, the band started, and a man asked Kathy to dance. She politely declined, then pulled me onto the dance floor. As we danced, I kept an eye on Benson, making sure he didn't realize I was Kathy's husband. I was still working out my next move, and it was already 9:30, the tension gnawing at me. When a slow song started, Kathy held me unusually tight, almost uncomfortably so. I noticed Benson watching, seeming tense. I smiled and gave him a thumbs up, trying to dismiss him. After the dance, we returned to our table. Just then, Greg Bartlett approached with a small package, whispered something to Kathy, handed it to her, and walked away. Kathy hid the package behind her back and leaned over to me. "I need to go to the bathroom," she said. I sensed something was off. "Don't do this," I told her. "Don't do what?" she asked. I grabbed her hand, looking into her eyes. "You know what I'm talking about. I'm not stupid. Stop this now." "I don't know what you mean," she insisted. "I just need to go to the bathroom." Kathy pulled her hand away and walked off without looking back. While she was gone, I started piecing everything together. The real trouble began when she first started calling Hanson Jack, which bothered me. Then came her sudden depression, and the news that the deal with National Pharmaceutical was at risk, with Kathy fearing she'd be blamed despite doing nothing wrong. All those meetings with Bartlett Hansen and the client followed. Kathy seemed to be tracking her, or someone else's, cycle, and that night was marked as a fertile one, even though she was still on the pill. Then we argued about her shaving. She never explained why, and I didn't tell her what I saw earlier. Hansen kissing her stomach as I stood on the porch. My world felt like it was falling apart. I couldn't face her while she was with him, so I opened the garage door, giving them a chance to stop whatever was happening. When I finally went inside, I saw Hansen rushing across the street to his car. It seemed Benson saw Kathy and decided he needed her, influencing Hansen. I didn't waste time figuring out why, just knew I had to stop it. Bartlett and Hansen were deeply involved, and I wanted to ruin their plans. By 9:45, Kathy hadn't returned from the restroom and time was running out. I decided to find her, take her home, and deal with the fallout later. As I headed for the door, the band announced a break and an idea struck me. I noticed Benson, Bartlett, and Hansen together at the bar, the perfect audience. I approached the lead singer and asked, "Can you keep your mic on? I need to make an announcement." "Sure, no problem," he said, handing me the wireless mic. "It's ready, just flip the switch." I took a moment to gather my thoughts, then turned on the microphone. "May I have your attention, please?" I said, but the room was still noisy. "May I have your attention, please?" I repeated, and slowly the room quieted down, with most guests now looking my way. I saw Katie coming back from the restroom. Then I glanced at the trio of idiots, Benson, Bartlett, and Hansen. All three were staring at me with curious looks on their faces. "Can I get everyone's attention?" The room fell silent. Kathy stood in the doorway and looked at me. "Thank you. I just want to take a few minutes to speak to you all about this special occasion. First, what a great party this is. Let's give a round of applause to those who put it together." Most of the room started clapping, and Kathy began walking slowly toward me, looking scared. "I've had a few drinks and I'm feeling pretty good, so hopefully I can get the words out right. I wanted to share some things about me and my wonderful wife, Kathy." I glanced at Kathy and smiled, then looked at the three idiots by the bar. I couldn't tell what they were thinking, but they didn't look happy. "First, some good news. Katie and I are expecting a baby." Many of the guests clapped. Katie covered her face with her hands, as if mildly embarrassed to anyone who didn't know the real story. Hansen looked mad. Bartlett looked confused, but I couldn't read Benson. "There's more good news. Kathy told me she's getting a promotion tonight for her work on the National Pharmaceutical deal. Apparently, Kathy, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Hansen, and Mr. Benson will be meeting upstairs tonight to sign the contract. Isn't that great?" More applause. "Oh God, please stop," I heard Kathy say. She stopped about 10 feet away from me and slowly sank to the floor. The idiots, numbers 1 and 2, were furious. Benson looked almost amused. "The night started out so strangely that I thought I'd share it with you. When I got home from work, I found my lovely wife in the bathroom about to shave." Laughter rippled through the crowd, but most sat stunned. "We had a little argument about it. She said it was meant to be a surprise and I told her not to do it. I thought I won that argument, but now I realize she wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it for Jack." At that, there was an audible gasp. Katie was lying on the floor crying, and most of the guests were looking at me like they were witnessing a train wreck. Only 2 idiots remained now. Benson had disappeared. Hansen was bright red and shaking. Bartlett started walking toward me like he could stop me. "Katie did it because she was supposed to be Mr. Benson's gift tonight. It seems your company's management thinks it's good business to encourage employees to sleep with clients to get contracts, even if it ruins their marriages." Bartlett was now right in front of me, trying to grab the mic. I snatched it from him and turned it off. "Listen, idiot, try to take my mic again, and I'll toss you like a sack of rocks. Actually, I'll do it anyway." Bartlett backed off and exchanged a look with Hansen. I turned the mic back on. "One last thing for Bartlett and Hansen. I'm suing this company for what you did to my marriage, and I'm sure I'll be compensated. Part of the deal will be that you 2 idiots, and everyone else involved, get fired. Good night, everyone, and enjoy your vacation." The room was dead silent as I put the mic down and walked over to Katie, who was still on the floor. I squatted down next to her. "Katie." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Fred, I'm so—" "Katie, don't say anything," I interrupted. "Think you'll still get that promotion?" I stood up and looked around. People were staring, but when I looked back at them, they quickly turned away. I took one last look at Katie and walked out, grabbing my coat. I was heading toward the door when Hansen stepped in front of me. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I entertained you before you, DC, and H could finish entertaining my wife, and I hope I just cost you millions. I'd hate to think we all went through that for a few $100,000. "You'll pay for this," Hansen said. "Actually, I think you're the one who's going to pay," I replied. "Along with the lawsuit, I'll be talking to the SEC. I'm sure they'll be interested in your company's business practices." I turned to leave, and Hansen grabbed my arm. "Wait, I'm not done with you," he said. I brushed his hand off. "Touch me again and you won't walk out of here tonight," I said. I heard him cursing under his breath as I walked away. When I got home, I went straight to the liquor cabinet, grabbed a bottle of scotch, and started drinking myself to sleep. I think that's when the nightmares began. I was on my second drink when I noticed something blue in one of the large pots on the kitchen floor. I got up to see what it was. It was a blue plastic case hidden under the plant. I knew what it was as soon as I picked it up. When I opened it, my suspicions were confirmed. I remembered something falling out of the bathroom trash can on Monday morning. I searched the kitchen, but never thought to check the flower pot. I walked back to the couch and set the case on the coffee table beside the scotch. I poured another glass and took a large sip. Then I picked up the case again and opened it. Staring at it, I thought, it's pretty damn full. Nothing's missing. I put it back down and poured myself another drink. I'm not sure how long I lasted, but by 9 o'clock Saturday morning, I woke up on the couch in the family room. The bottle of scotch was nearly empty. My head was pounding and my mouth tasted awful. I stood up, feeling dizzy for a moment, and my stomach churned. I started the coffee maker and headed to the shower. Upstairs, I noticed Katie still hadn't come home, and I didn't expect her to. Either she was scared to face me, or she was pissed that I'd ruined things at DC and H. I wasn't sure I cared. The shower helped, and I felt a bit better. After 2 cups of coffee, scrambled eggs, and toast, I sat back down on the couch in the family room, trying to think through my next move. My heart ached, thinking about how much I loved Kathy. How could she do this to us? I couldn't believe her ambition had driven her to sleep with a client just to secure a deal. I doubted I could ever forgive her for this, but I knew I had to give her a chance to explain herself if she wanted to. I wasn't going to chase her down for an explanation. If she didn't feel the need to justify her actions to me, I didn't need to know why. The reasons would only matter if she wanted a second chance. All I could do was wait and see if Kathy would reach out to me. I started wondering where she spent the night and remembered how she looked when I left the party. Guilt washed over me for leaving her on the floor. I should have taken her home. I wasn't proud of myself, but I was hurt, angry, and had no sympathy for Katie. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt, and the more I wondered where she was. At 11 o'clock, I was still on the couch when the phone rang. I assumed it was Kathy and debated whether to answer. I picked up on the 6th ring. "Mr. Alpin?" "Yes? This is Special Agent Mark Walker with the FBI," said the voice on the line. "Is your wife with you?" "No, my wife isn't home," I said, wondering why the FBI wanted to talk to Kathy. "No problem. You're the one I need to speak with," Agent Walker said. "Me?" I asked. "About what?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," he replied. "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "I think so," I said. "Where are you located?" Agent Walker gave me directions to his office, and I agreed to meet him at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After the call, I tried to figure out what the FBI wanted with me. The best guess I had was that it must be about one of the cases I'd recently worked on. But if that was it, why couldn't he just tell me over the phone? Over the years, I'd spoken with law enforcement plenty of times regarding cases I'd handled, and it never bothered me. But something about this FBI invitation made me uneasy. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I put on jeans and a sweater and headed downtown to meet Agent Walker. I parked in a lot across the street from the high-rise office building that housed the FBI offices in downtown Indianapolis. I took the elevator to the 7th floor and gave my name to the receptionist. "I'm here to see Special Agent Walker," I said. "Please have a seat. I'll let him know you're here," she replied. I waited only 2 minutes before he appeared in the lobby. Unlike the expensive Armani suit he wore the night before, Special Agent Walker was dressed casually in blue Dockers and a white Oxford shirt, no tie. "Mr. Alpin, thank you for coming," he said. "Please, follow me." I followed him into a conference room, and after sitting down, Agent Walker offered me a cup of coffee, which I accepted. He poured 2 cups from a coffee maker in the corner and handed one to me. After taking a sip, he sat down across from me. "Should I call you Special Agent Walker or Mr. Benson?" I asked. "Why don't you just call me Mark?" he said. "And may I call you Fred?" "Fred is fine," I said. "You must be pretty confused right now," Mark said. "I am, but I think I'm starting to understand," I replied. "You were working undercover as Mr. Benson, right?" "That's correct. I'm counting on your discretion to keep what I'm about to tell you confidential," he said. "You don't need to worry. I'm an investigator myself and understand confidentiality," I said. "But I'm still not sure whether you're a friend or foe. I hope you can explain how my wife got mixed up in all this." "I'll tell you everything I can, and I'll answer your questions, as long as they don't compromise our investigation." "Fair enough," I said. "Earlier this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission reached out to the FBI," he began. "They received troubling information about DC&H's business practices from someone inside the company and asked us to investigate. After following up on the information provided by the SEC, we found enough evidence to warrant a deeper investigation. I can't give you too many details, but we decided that an undercover operation was necessary." Mark stood up and began pacing as he spoke. "During our investigation, we discovered that DC&H was trying to interest National Pharmaceutical in a merger," Mark explained. "Mr. Benson had voiced concerns about DC&H's tactics to one of our agents. We later found out that no one from DC&H had actually met with Mr. Benson. With his cooperation, I assumed his identity and started negotiating with DC&H. I managed to convince Hansen and Bartlett that I was Benson, and I made them think I was interested in their merger proposal and ready to sign. But once they started getting excited about the millions they thought they'd earn, I acted hesitant. I told them I wanted to talk to other firms before committing, just to see what they'd do to get me to sign." "So did you ask about my wife?" I interrupted. "Not exactly. On my first visits to DC&H's office, I was introduced to your wife when I was escorted into the conference room to meet Bartlett and Hansen. I mentioned to Hansen that I'd like to speak with Mrs. Alpin." "Why?" I asked, trying to keep calm. Hansen responded by saying, "She's very attractive, isn't she?" I agreed, but that wasn't the reason I asked to see her. "Then why did you want to see her?" I told Hansen that since she was head of accounting, I wanted to discuss the company's financials, considering I was supposedly planning to merge. "The truth is, your wife was the whistleblower who went to the SEC, raising concerns about how DC&H was operating." "So, Kathy knew you were working undercover for the FBI?" I asked, now more confused. "No, she didn't know," Mark said. "The information she provided to the SEC implicated people higher up than Bartlett and Hansen. She named the president and CEO. I couldn't be sure if I could trust her. My assignment was to investigate Bartlett and Hansen, and I couldn't risk her blowing my cover to protect them. So, Katie was the one who reported the company execs. I wasn't sure what that meant for me. If she didn't know Benson was a fake, was she really going to go through with it? I thought to myself. I had questions for Mark at the party, but I decided to wait and see if his story answered them. As I mentioned, I made it clear to Hansen that I might walk away from the deal. So he asked what it would take to make me sign with DC&H. I asked him what he could offer. That's when Hansen said, "I noticed you think Kathy Alpin is quite beautiful. How'd you like a piece of her?" I was stunned. I expected a bribe, not that. I needed to see how far this would go, so I told him I might be interested but didn't commit. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I listened. "This next part might be hard for you to hear, but it's crucial to the story," Mark said cautiously. "You can't tell me anything worse than what I've already been through," I replied bitterly. "All right then," he continued. A few days later, I met with Hansen again. He asked if I'd thought about his offer. I asked if he meant arranging for me to sleep with your wife, and he confirmed it. I didn't want to seem too eager, so I said I was interested, but still unsure she was worth it. Hansen assured me that she was. I still didn't see how he could deliver on such a promise, so I asked how he planned to get a married woman to agree to that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Let me worry about that," Hansen told me. "If you want her, she's yours." That was all he said. "That son of a witch," I muttered under my breath. "Who the hell does he think he is? He's just a nasty fool." Mark nodded, acknowledging my anger. I got the sense he wanted me to take the offer not just to get me to sign, but for some other twisted reason. I let him talk for a while, then I asked when he could arrange for me to meet your wife. Without hesitation, he said it would happen at the company Christmas party on the 20th. "So, were you going to go through with it?" I asked. "Were you just going to sleep with my wife for the sake of your investigation?" "No, I had no intention of sleeping with your wife," Mark said firmly. First, it would have been unethical. And second, I was pretty sure the room where I was supposed to meet your wife would be wired with hidden cameras and microphones to record everything. It wasn't just meant to get me to sign the deal. It was also set up for blackmail. How did you plan to get out of it? I asked. I was going to back out at the last minute, saying the situation wasn't right. Then I'd suggest making the deal if Mrs. Alpin met me in a hotel room after the party. Once she was alone, I was going to reveal my identity and bring her in for questioning. We had planned to arrest Bartlett and Hansen today, and we believed we'd have enough evidence to charge them both this morning. I was quiet for a moment, taking it all in. You came up to me last night, introduced yourself, and said you were from security. The thing is, I already knew who you were, and I was scared you knew what was happening and were in on it. I wasn't sure whose side you were on until you gave your speech. Oh man, I said, rubbing my temples. I hope I didn't ruin your investigation. But I couldn't just stand there and let my wife sleep with someone as part of a business deal. I understand, Mark said. And no, you didn't mess anything up. In fact, you saved me from a meeting I was supposed to have with them at 10 o'clock last night. I was able to walk away with my cover intact and talk to Hansen again. This morning, he made me a big cash offer, which I was supposed to finalize today. I told him I'd meet him at his office Monday morning, and when he handed me the money, we'd arrest him and shut down DC&H while we conduct a full investigation into all their deals from the past 3 years. I still don't understand Kathy's role in all of this, I said. Your wife was trying to do the right thing by reporting the company, Mark explained. As for her being part of the offer, I believe Hansen pressured her. He likely blackmailed her in some way. I knew I had to find Kathy. I needed to hear her side of the story. She wasn't entirely innocent, but there were mitigating factors. That's really all I can share right now, Mark said. Do you have any more questions? Not at the moment. Good. I'd like to remind you not to discuss this investigation with anyone. Also, please don't tell your wife about the FBI operation yet. Wait until Bartlett and Hansen are indicted, and then let her know it was all part of a covert investigation. That'll happen in a few days. We'll need to speak with her then, too. I agreed to keep quiet about the investigation. Mark said he'd call me to let me know when I could tell Kathy about the FBI's involvement, and mentioned they'd likely want to question me to get my perspective. We shook hands, and I left the building. When I got home, there was a message from Kathy asking me to call her. I dialed the number she left, and a woman answered. "Who's calling?" she asked. "Tell her it's her husband," I replied. Kathy sounded nervous when she got on the line. "Where have you been?" she asked shakily. "I have been trying to reach you all day." "Not all day," I said. "I was home until 1. "Oh, I guess I started calling around then." I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I wanted her to take the initiative and explain what was going on, so I stayed silent. "Fred, can I come home?" she asked. "You live here, don't you?" "You should already be here," I replied coldly. "I'll be home in an hour." "Okay," I said, and hung up. It was already 5 in the evening. I decided to make dinner for when she got back, so we could talk afterward. I cooked dinner and then went upstairs to prepare myself for what I expected would come next. Back downstairs, I picked up the blue case from the coffee table and put it in my pocket. I made spaghetti with meatballs and a salad, then opened a bottle of Chianti. Kathy walked in at 6:05 and dinner was ready. When she saw the meal and the wine, I could see the tension leave her face. She must have thought it wouldn't be as bad as she'd feared. At first, we didn't talk. We sat down, and I poured the wine. We started eating in heavy silence. After a few minutes, I broke it. "Where did you stay last night?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Kathy hesitated. "Did a friend drive you home after I left?" I teased her, unable to resist. "You didn't stay until the end of the party," I added. "You practically ended the party with your speech," she responded. "I guess I owe some people an apology for that. Not to you, though, and definitely not to Bartlett or Hansen." Kathy didn't argue. "You're right. I owe you an apology," she said softly. She was about to continue, but I stopped her. "We'll talk after dinner," I said, and we fell silent again. There wasn't much more to say over the meal. Afterward, Kathy started clearing the dishes, but I stopped her. "You can clean up later. Right now we need to talk," I said. We moved to the family room and sat down facing each other. "Do you want to tell me everything, or should I ask questions? Either way, I expect the truth," I said firmly. "I'll tell you everything," Kathy replied, her voice trembling. "I'm sure you know when it started. It was the day after your Christmas party. Jack called and said the big deal with National Pharmaceutical was in trouble. He told me that Mr. Benson had said he'd only sign the contract if I agreed to spend the night with him. I couldn't believe he'd ask me that. I was furious, but Jack said the deal was critical to the company, and if I agreed, I'd get a big reward. Lots of money and a promotion. She paused, and I let her continue without interrupting. I didn't want to do it, Fred, but Jack kept pressuring me, saying people were depending on me. I told him I needed time to think, but they confused and worried me so much that I couldn't think clearly. When you came home, I realized I couldn't do that to you. On Monday, Jack and Bartlett hounded me all day, telling me if the deal fell through, it would be my fault, and they'd fire me. Kathy's voice cracked as she looked down. They also said I'd be fired if I told anyone. I tried to hint at it to you, but I was scared. I knew if you found out the whole truth, you'd do something drastic, and I'd lose my job. On Tuesday, I told them I wouldn't do it, but they asked me to reconsider. I felt anger rising, but kept calm. Go on, I said. Hansen told me the company was missing over $100,000, and if there was an audit, it would look like I'd been embezzling. Jack said if I didn't cooperate, there would be an audit and I'd be charged. I felt trapped and had no choice. They kept telling me I was doing the right thing and that you'd understand if you knew how important the deal was. My patience was thinning. You thought I'd understand you sleeping with someone for a deal? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. You should have told me everything. I could have helped you. I know, she whispered, but I was scared. I didn't want to go to jail. When I agreed, I felt so guilty, but I was terrified of losing my job and going to prison. I could feel my pulse pounding. So you agreed to sleep with him? Kathy nodded, tears filling her eyes. Yes, but when I saw you at the party with the microphone, I panicked. I didn't know what you were going to do. I was shocked when you said I was pregnant. I didn't say you were pregnant, I replied coldly. I said we were going to have a baby. That was the plan, wasn't it? Yes, but... She hesitated. But what? Are we starting a family or not? I pressed. Yes, we are. I'll stop taking the pills tomorrow and we can start, she said quickly. I was just so stressed I wasn't thinking clearly. So Bartlett and Hansen coerced you and I ruined their deal by catching you, I said, cutting through her excuses. Is that it? Kathy looked down, her face flushed. Yes, but I don't blame you. I understand why you reacted the way you did. I'm upset with myself. Oh, great, I said sarcastically. So, you forgive me for trying to stop my wife from sleeping with another man? Kathy shook her head. That's not what I meant. I know you had every right to react the way you did. She trailed off, tears streaming. Do you think you can ever forgive me? It depends, I said flatly. Is that everything? Have you told me all I need to know? Yes, she whispered. I studied her. All right, I just have a few more questions, then we can move forward. Kathy looked at me with a glimmer of hope. What kind of questions? I tossed the blue case onto the coffee table. I found this in the trash. It's full. You threw away your birth control pills last week, didn't you? But you didn't tell me. Just now you said you'd stop taking them tomorrow. Care to explain? Kathy turned pale, her mouth opening without a word. Finally, she admitted softly. You're right. I stopped taking the pill. I thought getting pregnant would be a nice surprise since I knew you wanted a family. I stared at her in disbelief. That only works if we'd been physical engaged. But the last time we were together was before you stopped. Why didn't you tell me? Kathy's voice trembled. I was upset with what Jack and Bartlett were asking me to do. I wasn't in the mood. And did you know last night was your most fertile night? I asked. Kathy froze, shocked. No, I didn't realize that, she stammered. It's strange that you plan to sleep with Benson right in the middle of your cycle, I said. What are you implying? She asked, panicking. That I'd risk getting pregnant. I wouldn't do that. I was fed up. How long have you been with Hansen? I asked, my voice cold. Kathy's eyes widened. What? She whispered. No more lies, I said firmly. I saw Hansen kiss your stomach. Were you planning to let me think his baby was mine? Kathy broke down sobbing as I continued. You spent last night with him, didn't you? She cried uncontrollably. I left the room, packed my suitcase, and when I returned, she jumped up, pleading, Please don't leave me. I love you. Jack blackmailed me. I kept packing. Why didn't you just keep taking the pills and lie to Jack? You had no problem lying to me. I wasn't thinking straight. I was scared. I didn't stop. I guess I believe what you told him more than anything you've told me. Her sobs filled the room as I continued packing. By the way, I said, "I heard you tell him I love you last night." Kathy froze, guilt and panic in her eyes.
"I don't love him, Fred," she cried. "If I get pregnant, I'll have infanticide. Please, I love you."
"No," I said coldly.
"Don't do it because of me. You made your choice."
She collapsed, sobbing on the floor as I walked out. When I glanced back, all I felt was disgust. I didn't love her anymore, and the house no longer held any meaning for me. It's been over 2 years since I left Kathy. After that night, I got an apartment and started over. That's when the nightmares began. Unsatisfied with my life, I quit my job, moved to California, and started my own investigation company. I called my old friend Bill Ripley, who joined me a few months later. Bill told me Mary Farrell had heard about our company and wanted to work with us. She moved to California, and 2 months later, we started dating. We moved in together 3 months after that. I was surprised at how quickly I fell in love again. While I wasn't rushing to remarry, I was glad to have someone I cared about to share my life with. I've kept a few connections in Indianapolis, including Special Agent Mark Walker, who kept me updated after the investigation. It turned out that on Jack Hansen's orders, Kathy had been digging into the company president and CEO, hoping to expose their shady deals and have the board fire them. Hansen had dreams of becoming the next president of DC&H. Kathy wasn't lying about not loving Hansen. She was using him, knowing he was in love with her. She believed if he succeeded, she'd get everything she wanted. Hansen and his wife didn't have children, which he blamed on her. After I left, he tried for over a month to get Kathy pregnant, but it didn't work. He was infertile. Hansen's wife found out about the affair and divorced him. A month later, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for his actions at DC, and H. Bartlett also got 2 years in a minimum security prison. Kathy was fired, and the company was bought out by a larger consulting firm. Last I heard, Kathy is teaching accounting at a community college in Ohio. I don't think about her much. The wounds are still too fresh. I don't miss her, and Mary has filled the space Kathy left in my life, which is why I married her. Now, I'm sitting here, looking at Mary, thinking about waking her. Not to tell her I had a dream, but to say I love her. Last night, she told me that whenever I'm ready for a baby, all I have to do is ask. "Just order early," she joked, "because labor takes 9 months. I might place that order tomorrow. Oh, and in case you're wondering, DC&H stands for Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.